I've given this movie a lot of thought. I just saw this. I'm going to shoot this review very underexposed where you can barely see me, much like most of this movie is. Um, to give you the kind of short of it first, just in case you don't want to see a long review, I did not like this movie. I came in wanting to like this movie. I'm a big Robert Pattinson fan. I'm a Paul Dano fan. I don't recall the name of many of the other key actors in this film, but I've seen them in other TV. The guy who played Falcone, I believe, was in this criminally underrated HBO episodic single season series called The Night of, which I believe is a criminally underrated masterpiece. Um, by the way, that guy who played Falcone is one of the most aggressively like Israeli Jewish persons you've ever seen. He's not even a New York Jew, and he is absolutely most certainly not Italian. And that actor, while I think he actually did a great job in this movie, made no attempt to sound Italian, made no attempt to look Italian, didn't even straighten his hair. Meanwhile, the makeup they had on Colin Farrell to just waste him as Penguin. So let's talk about the problem with this movie. It's 3 hours long. And the reason why it's 3 hours long is because it is 2.5 films smashed into one. It felt like watching the Lord of the Rings extended edition trilogy back to back, which, by the way, takes, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10.5 hours or 10-ish hours. This movie was only 3 hours. The longest movie, and I never would have wanted to see this in theaters, by the way. The longest movie I've ever seen in theaters is The Hateful Eight, and that movie had the good grace to have a 15-minute intermission in the middle of it, so you could fuck off and go to the bathroom, have a smoke, get a shit, get some concessions. Uh, Not this movie. This movie's first 90 minutes started off strong. Good character acting. I liked them showing Batman being a detective. I kind of liked just jumping into Batman, and not only jumping into Batman, but jumping into Batman where he has the respect and cooperation of the police force. But then they went back on that and went like, oh, like 90% of the police force actually hates Batman, but for some reason Gordon has the pull. By the way, Gordon, that guy from Westworld, I like him, but he becomes the what 1150th redhead to be replaced with a black dude. Is it a running joke? Is this racism? I don't have red hair, but I have a red beard, and I'm about 80% Irish by ethnicity. I consider this movie racist against me, just like all the Spider-Man movies with Mary Jane Watson, Tris Marigold, Starfire. Like if it's a video game or cape shit redhead, it is replaced by a black person as a matter of Hollywood law. And I'm beginning to find that fucking annoying and tedious, and they should fucking stop. I know that Hollywood actually literally does by law have to fit black and gay and random fucking ethnicities into their movie, and we can't have a movie about white people. There has to be more than population representation of LGBT, more than genre appropriate amount of women, and there has to be far, far, far more black people than is necessary. But hey, it's a movie in the inner city. I'll just let it go. This movie couldn't make up its mind whether or not Batman was a good detective or required Deus Ex Machina constantly to just hand him a solution to something. And somehow Pattinson pulled off a good performance when he had to go into three different recursive character arcs about, what is my relationship to my parents? Is my parents' legacy actually good or evil? Um, I know the movie pulled its punch at the end and didn't really do it, but this growing trend of painting the very important character trait of Batman, that his parents were paragons of society and good, upstanding people who were the best of the philanthropist class, which is often looked down on these days. Um, but they were what Batman wanted to be and couldn't be because of trauma, and to color in any way his parents is crazy or corrupt is the worst part of the Joker, and something I hated about this film. And it was also an unnecessary arc that didn't need to be in this film. Let's go with characters. Selena Kyle I thought was pretty okay, even though she was race mixed as well, but I didn't care. I like that actress very much. She's actually beautiful and relatively charismatic, and I liked her. However, she should have been cut out of this movie and it could have been Batman and Gordon versus the world. Or we could have cut Gordon mostly out of this movie and had Batman and Catwoman versus the world. But the movie couldn't give Batman a consistent sidekick and oftentimes put him in constant conflict with his sidekicks that got them away from the movie rather than building any kind of buddy cop or odd couple character arc at all. There were many villains that should have been cut out of this movie. Colin Farrell's Penguin should have been 100% stone cold, no argument, objective fact. He should have been cut out of this movie. The only reason why he was in this movie is to have a car chase where his Maserati, or it might have been an Aston Martin, couldn't tell because the film is so fucking dark, but I believe it was a Maserati, outsped a jet-powered Batmobile on a fucking 10-minute long car chase, which ended in a giant explosion so we could have a nice fire Batman walking through fire for the trailer in the cool muscle car Batmobile for the trailer. But keep in mind that big fiery explosion at the end of that car chase, I want to say by the most conservative estimates, killed 20 innocent civilians and more than likely killed more than 50 innocent civilians. And he didn't even arrest the Penguin. He just wrenched some information out of him that he didn't need to get specifically from the Penguin. He could have asked somebody else in Falcone's organization who the fucking rat was. Catwoman went on this very long odyssey into Oswald Cobblepot's fucking bar to show how many people in Gotham's government were members of a criminal conspiracy, and it was like the entire district attorney's office, like 10 to 15 police officers at least, multiple politicians, including the incumbent mayor who's killed at the beginning of the movie. Spoilers, by the way. And that also could have been shortened, especially if you were considering the possibility of cutting more than an hour out of this film by cutting Selina Kyle out of this film entirely and focusing on Gordon and Batman doing police work versus the Riddler. There was way too many villains, way too many protagonists, way too many scenes with cops that could have been cut. The car chase could have been cut. You could have cut the Batmobile completely out of this movie, especially since for the majority of Batman's time riding a vehicle, he is riding a motorcycle. You could have cut the Batmobile out of this movie, or conversely, cut the motorcycle out of this movie and put the Batmobile in. Are you sensing a pattern in this review? That there is just somebody who thinks the best way to make a stew is to put literally all of the ingredients you have into it and hope it comes out as jambalaya and not vomit. This movie was mostly vomit, I'm sorry to say. Um, Paul Dano was great when he was in costume. He overacted to Jesse Eisenberg in Batman vs. Superman levels of what the fuck are you doing towards the end of the film when he was unmasked, and he unmasked himself on purpose and allowed himself to be arrested on purpose and then blew up the fucking city, which also didn't need to happen, which also extended the runtime of this film as the big blowing up the water and sinking in flooding the big amphitheater that everybody's fleeing into did not need to be in this movie. However, it was one of the best action scenes and best shootouts and best fight scenes in this movie, so I guess I'm okay with it being in, even though that's the same criticism I levied towards the chase scene. I'm doing this as fast as I can because I have so many negative things to say about this film. But what did I like? Andy Serkis was also wasted. You didn't even need to have Alfred in this movie, and I also think, as much as I like Andy Serkis and gave a great performance, he was miscast. I thought Colin Farrell gave a pretty good performance. He was miscast and also didn't need to be in the film. I thought Selina Kyle was good casting, with the exception of the fact that it's racist against Irish people. I liked the guy who played Gordon. I thought he did a great job. Again, another weird race mixing, replacing a Sicilian for a just blatantly Jewish person who didn't even try to act in any way anything other than Jewish. But I still really like that actor, despite that whole thing, you know. What's the word I'm looking for? God, there's so much to go over that I could probably have forgotten the fourth out of 7 acts in this film, probably. The whole Riddler plot kind of flips over when Riddler can't get to Bruce Wayne, but Riddler never does anything to show that he's trying to get to Bruce Wayne besides the one bomb that hit Alfred. And it should have been clear when he couldn't get to Bruce Wayne because Bruce Wayne has been Batman, and I've been awake for 48 hours, which is probably why this review sucks and part of why possibly why I'm a little bit cranky on this movie, but you'll see. But I don't think Batman slept more than 4 or 5 hours in this movie, and this movie takes place over I think 4 or 5 days, and it does begin to show how. And as much as I love the bat suit, which looked amazing in this movie, we were not clear on what kind of abuse Batman can take. He can fall off of buildings and slam into shit while paragliding. He can be shot by roughly 1,200 rounds of 5.56 ammunition at point blank range, meaning this has to be relatively heavy armor. But he's one of the faster moving Batmans on screen, and I love that they lifted a lot of the fight scene choreography directly from the Arkham Asylum games, as well as a lot of the aesthetic with Riddler's stuff was borrowed heavily from those games, and that was a good thing to borrow from. The score, I didn't like half the time and did like half the time. I liked the fact that it was all built around, I believe the song is called Something in the Way by Nirvana, which is a song I've loved for a very long time. But it also kind of shoehorns in a little Danny Elfman ripoff shit, or homage as they call it, but they just literally just play it. It's not even a variation. And they do the same thing to, I don't think it's Hans Zimmer. I don't recall who does the very famous Dark Knight score, but they lift a lot of that too. At times the score is tonally correct, and sometimes it's not really tonally right with what's going on screen. Sometimes it's nice and understated. Sometimes it's too quiet, and much of the movie the score is far, far too loud. Sorry about the wind there. So, even as much as I liked the actors, and a lot of my optimism and hype going into this movie had to do with the quality of dramatic actors who were cast in this movie, there's almost no guys I don't consider to be good except for Colin Farrell. Now, Farrell is well beloved by many fans, especially by Irish people, but ironically, I don't think he's very good. He's not bad. He's perfectly mediocre, which is getting me more in line to the score of this film. Now, for those of you who don't understand how I score things, slide up a little bit so you can see me. I don't do your classic scoring system where a lot of people do an out of 10 and then everything they watch is between a 7 and a 10, otherwise known as a 4-star grading system. You should use that. All my scores start at 5, which is perfectly mediocre. And every time I like your movie, we go towards 10. Every time we hate your movie, we go towards 1. There were a few things I liked a lot about this movie. There were many, many things I strongly disliked about this movie, or at least mildly disliked about this movie, and I think this is an aggressively bad screenplay. Whoever wrote the screenplay for this movie should be beaten with a dirty shoe. It is garbage. The director, I believe his name is Mark Reeves. I don't know what else he's directed. He's not very good. To the point that this movie looks good or has any kind of tonal consistency, you can thank the director's photography, who I think didn't shoot this movie as dark as it is. A lot of it looks darkened in post, which was a huge mistake. A lot of this, I've cut a lot of slack towards movies that have been criticized as being too dark to see. This movie takes Too Dark to See to an apt to, brother, you could say that again. This movie is eye-strainingly ugly dark, where it's often very hard to tell what's going on. And I like some of the cinematography, which I want to thank the photography team for. I don't really feel like giving the director credit for that. If he was more involved with photography, and it's unfair for me to judge his photography skills on his poor character directing skills, then so be it. But honestly, I think he did a poor job. And I think the only reason why this movie isn't getting an extremely bad score is decent score, as in the music. very good acting given how bad the screenplay is and often how terrible the dialogue is. Um, and often how much social justice messaging is fit into this movie. A lot of it's subtle, which means some people won't notice it because they can't understand subtlety, which is why they're cape shit fans to begin with. I'm just a sucker for Batman, so forgive me for this long-winded review. But really, this movie was too long. It was like 3 to 4 movies in one. There were characters that just took screen time away from each other. One or more central villains or central supporting cast members for the protagonist needed to be cut. This movie could be cut into 2 90-minute films. I believe it's pretty doable. Like, literally take what is existing as the theatrical cut and split it in half. I believe that is possible. Um, it also could be made into a trilogy. This movie itself, a trilogy, if you took, because there's like fucking 9 acts and there's 4 false endings. You could cut 20 minutes right off this film, just cutting those completely unnecessary and tedious and boring and repetitive false endings. You could cut the big flood scene out of the end. Um, but that would have taken out one of the best fight scenes. I also didn't really like that the Batsuit, you couldn't tell what he could take or not take. Batman should have either shown more fatigue or they should have did a better job of showing time passing. There is also the cardinal sin, or it's not a cardinal sin, but it's something a lot of movie reviewers I like noticing, where oftentimes characters will be doing something in the middle of the day and then 5 minutes later it's deep into the night and there has not been a time skip. They just come inside during like noon, do something for 30 minutes and come out and it's 10 o'clock at night. Fuck off. Once you notice that, you can't unnotice it. It breaks immersion. It's bad. Stop doing that. But okay, let's just get to a final score because my throat is very hoarse and I'm extremely tired and I've been just having a horrible week. But I don't think that's the reason why I don't like this movie. So what would I score this? Much as I want to like it, much as I rather like Robert Pattinson and rather like his performance, both as Bruce Wayne and Batman. By the way, my arguments for the better Bruce Waynes is, of course, not Christian Bale. Christian Bale is a bad Bruce Wayne. The best Bruce Waynes are Val Kilmer and Michael Keaton. Val Kilmer doesn't get enough credit because of how much Batman Forever is, first of all, a campy, more kids-oriented film, and it is a very good camp film, and it is a very good kid film, and maybe some adults didn't like how over-the-top and cartoony it was. But I very much love that. I think that's one of Joel Schumacher's best movies. How does it compare to something like that, or how about the Nolan verse? By the way, I will tell you that the second worst Batman movie of all time is Dark Knight Rises. That is a fucking terrible movie, and Dark Knight Rises suffers from a lot of the editing choices, storyline choices, characterization decisions, and insanely long screenplays problems that this movie has. And this movie should have watched Dark Knight Rises and said, "Don't do that," and they did. I would actually rate this as the 4th worst Batman movie, maybe 3rd. Okay, because of course Batman and Robin, Dark Knight Rises is fucking terrible. And if you count Batman versus Superman, that's one of the absolute worst. So this would be 4th worst or 3rd worst, depending on how you count Batfleck. And I really wanted to like this movie. I was so hyped from the trailer. But you know, when I say like I like your movie, it goes towards 10. I hate your movie, it goes towards 1, and everything starts at a 5. This movie's a 4 out of 10. The things I disliked this movie about this movie noticeably and distinctly outweighed the things I liked about it, therefore giving it a negative, below par score. It is bad. It is below mediocre into its sucked range. It did not suck hard. It just sucked. And the things I really liked about this movie, I didn't really like, I just liked. There's just a couple of things that I'm a sucker for, like Robert Pattinson is one of my favorite actors. He's tremendous, and he did a great job. And everybody who thought he wouldn't do a great job, you were wrong, just like you were wrong about Heath Ledger, just like you're wrong about everybody you've ever cried about when you heard a Batman casting decision. You should shut up, unless that that actor's name is Jared Leto, in which case you should just. I was about to suggest doing something facetiously harmful to the movie studio or a casting director responsible. Don't do that, but complain vociferously and call that person a stupid fucking retard, because holy fucking shit, don't cast Jared Leto. But if you've seen Morbius, but anyway, it feels weird to say 4 out of 10 because I didn't hate the movie at all, and there were parts of it I loved in the first 90 minutes out of this 3-hour long film. But let's get this over with in like 22 minutes and just say that yes, it's a 4 out of 10. Even though I thought Gotham looked great, even though I actually like almost all of the casting, even though I love the Batsuit, I love the action, this is one of the worst screenplays I've seen in a while. This screenplay is a jumbled mess. It is sophomore garbage. It is shameful and pathetic, and whoever wrote this screenplay, which is probably about 50 people from what I've heard of the studio meddling, and I don't know if the studio just saved this movie from sucking ass, or the director in Robert Pattinson, with all his creative control and being a huge dick, saved this movie from sucking ass. Instead, this movie is mediocre to just kind of bad. Kind of bad to mediocre. It's really not good. It's pretty much one of the worst Batman movies I've ever seen, and I'm very disappointed. Extremely disappointed. I'm not mad. I'm not disgusted. I'm not offended. Well, kind of. I'm just very disappointed. I wanted to like this movie so much more than I did. I'm not open. I'm not prejudiced towards any part of it except for casting Gordon as a black person. Fuck you. Just stop doing that. Find a good Irish actor, or just put a tape of red mustache on Michael Fassbender. Just do something, you fucking assholes. Stop doing that. Not that he did a bad job, because he really didn't, but I'm exhausted, guys. I've been extremely sick. I did get hospitalized last week, and then I had to, with a mild head cold here, go on vacation, which I was not able to enjoy to the fullest, unfortunately. But, I watched this movie, and I stayed up for it when I really should not have. I really should not have. It was a mistake, and I've talked myself hoarse about it. I appreciate your time. If you love this movie, great. If you're forgiving and just don't notice flaws, if you completely shut off your brain for this, and you gave it a 10 out of 10, you're stupid. The maximal possible sycophant consumer cape shit enjoyer score for this movie is an 8. There is no way in hell you can forgive the absolutely unnecessary length of this film, the incredibly poor editing of this film, the piss poor screenplay of this film, the performances and crazy pyrotechnics, and God, Batman killed like 70 people in this movie, but which I hate when he does, but I can understand giving it an 8 if you're just really forgiving and you don't think about movies as you watch them and you just don't care and you just Batman go elbow strike, ha ha. Oh, they put like, what's that guy from Screen Rant where it's like they put that guy's in the movie. It's like they, oh, check out these fight choreographies, and like, that fight choreography is in the game. It is, sir. Yeah, like, if you're down with that, don't be offended by me. Don't think too much about it. But me as a person who recognized this as a movie that was trying very hard to be smart. It was not trying to be popcorn flick like Batman Forever, and Batman Forever is an excellent kids popcorn flick. It's really way better than people give it credit for. It's one of Schumacher's best films. This movie wanted to be smart and emotionally engaging, and it failed on both counts. The detective story is shit. The emotional character interactions are very poor. Extremely poor. And with the exception of Serkis and Pattinson giving it their absolute all in one conversation they have in a scene where both are in the hospital, there was no room for any characters to get along and make something happen in this movie, not even between Riddler and Batman, who are only face-to-face, like, once, towards the very end of this film. Yeah, dude, 4 out of 10 is generous. This movie objectively sucked. This movie is objectively bad, and I repeat, It's not very bad. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not a 1 out of 10. It's not even a 1 star out of 5, which would be a 2 out of 10. This is a 4. This movie sucks. I'm mad. I had friends that I trusted who hyped this movie to me and said it was great. They were wrong. But they were also people who don't think as much about films, but these are also people who do not think. And when my best friend came to me and talked to me at length about this film, she said, I think I kind of loved it, and said she loved Batman, and then talked to me without spoilers for well over half an hour about shit she did not like about this movie. She didn't like how this movie tried to. I appreciated that it tried to cover video game and comic book arcs, but tried to cover 5 or 6 of them in the same fucking film. So yeah, 4 out of 10, maybe even a 3.5. I'm mad at this movie. I'm very disappointed. But if you liked it, I'm happy for you. I wish I could be as carefree with movies as you are. And believe me being a just pathetic fanboy for Batman since I was old enough to walk, that's probably the gratuity, the generosity, the positive prejudice towards this film is included in that 4 out of 10. It's quite possibly a 3 out of 10 movie. It is just bad. Thanks for watching.